Greetings, everyone. It's AJ, one half of your gregarious, dynamic, charismatic, caffeinated Pacific Northwest duo of the Bellingham podcast. I just wanted to give everybody a quick heads up that Chris and I are doing fine, and the podcast is doing great. We're just been off the mic because of holiday and scheduling and COVID, and there's been a lot going on, or as we like to say on the show, life has occurred. And Chris and I will catch everybody up once we rejoin on the mic. But I just wanted to give a little bit of a teaser and a little bit of content for everybody in the Bellingham podcast fam. You may remember a few years ago, I started a side podcast out of a separate mini series that I intended here for the Bellingham podcast, and I spun it off called the Analog Explorer podcast. Well, I was able to do a little bit of a field report in and amongst the travel and freelancing that I've been doing, and I was able to catch up with a local company owner, not in Bellingham, but real close, only 45 minutes away, in Stanwood, Washington. I got to sit down with Matthew Graham, and we talked watches, but of the Pacific Northwest kind. So for my friends in the watch fam, here's a little bit of a teaser and part of that episode. Now, spoiler alert, it's not the full episode, but it's the part that would pertain to both the Bellingham podcast community as well as my peeps in the watch fam. For the full 36-minute episode, be sure to tune in at the Analog Explorer podcast, wherever you like to subscribe to podcasts, or go to analogexplorer.com. Now, while you are on your favorite podcast app of choice, obviously you're already subscribed to the Bellingham podcast and you just jumped over to Analog Explorer and hit subscribe. While you're at it, especially if you are in the education technology realm, my main man, Chris, even though he is off the mic here, you may want to hear his sweet, sultry baritone voice as he talks to the millions and millions of Canvas users out there. So if you don't know what Canvas is, we've mentioned it a few times. It's a learning management system. And Chris, he's pretty much the thing. He is the big show. He is the game. He is the people's champ when it comes to that platform. And if you want to get interesting, relevant, and applicable Canvas teaching and learning, take a listen to his podcast, The Canvas Insider. Now, some of you are probably thinking, AJ, I'm not in the whole ed tech sphere, but I like the technology, and especially the stuff that Chris brings up about security and being aware and OPSEC and InfoSec. So he's also got that covered too. Not in a podcast, but equally as cool. It's on Substack, just like you're probably subscribed to the BellinghamPodcast.substack.com. Chris has a growing newsletter called Grayman Technology, and it's novelly named GraymanTechnology.substack.com. So if you don't want to tune into the Canvas Insider, take a look at Chris's other alter ego of his alter ego. So without any further ado, let me dive into this bonus episode teaser of the Analog Explorer Episode 9, Aries Watches, out of Stanwood, Washington, live, well, pre-recorded, and on location. Now, let's see if I remember how to do this. It's been a while. Where's the button for the alter ego entrance for the Analog Explorer? Ah, there it is. And that leads us into the beginning of this episode. You see, I said that daydream for many in the watch enthusiast community starts with either the question, do I want to build a watch or do I want to build a watch company? And today's guest answered the question with building a watch with the intent of building a watch company. I'm AJ Barcet, and you've tuned into the Analog Explorer podcast. Read about my analog manifesto, my passion for photography, and my love of travel and watches in print or online at analogexplorer.com. Today, you're going to meet Matt. He is the owner and proprietor of Aries Watch Company, based out of Stanwood, Washington. Yes, you heard right. Washington State, in our own backyard here in the Pacific Northwest. And I have to admit, it was pretty exciting to drive 45 minutes away from Bellingham, Washington to meet up with a watch company owner in their all-new HQ, as well as their manufacturing shop. More on that later. As for Matt, his background comes from a lot of different things, one of which is not watchmaking. A trainer, working for the CIA, a lot of other things, but watchmaking or knowing French, two things not him. But what is him is his love for his family and the fact that this is a family business and the fact that he wanted to make this business where he was and where he was brought up, here in Washington State. And the watch? Meet the Diver 1. Now this is a watch that is a dive-inspired watch, but is really infused with a lot of the personality of the Pacific Northwest. Obviously it's wet up here, so being able to go anywhere and do anything is a requirement of the specifications of pretty much any gear. But Matt takes it to new depths, and you'll understand what I mean later. But this is a watch that is meant for anybody, whether it is a mission timer for somebody who is active in military service, the pilot jumping time zones, the Pacific Northwest enthusiast who goes paddleboarding on the weekends, or a teacher who just needs to be able to time a test for a 4th grade class. For Matt and for Aries, life is your mission, and their watch is the perfect timer for it. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe to the Analog Explorer podcast. But I don't want to leave you hanging there. So we're going to jump into part of the interview where it actually wrapped up. And what was cool is that I was getting a behind-the-scenes look of a part of watch manufacturing, specifically cases. Pacific Northwest made cases with real CNC machines, real chunks of metal, turned into something real, a real watch. So much like Chris and I have done in the past with our community, conversation, connection series, this is a connection with a little town close to us here in Bellingham, in Stanwood. And I want to take you on a little tour of a manufacturing floor of original Pacific Northwest made watch cases. Tell me the story of this, other than the fact that you've designed it, but this case originally started being produced offshore, but then it's being produced here in Washington.
Yeah, we're cutting them a mile down the street. As soon as you hit stop on our little interview today, I'm going to throw you in the car and we're going to go down there.
Rock on.
We're starting to cut titanium. So I was in there last night and there's some, so the titanium Diver 1.
Yeah.
I'll have.
Is that publicly known? Can we
say? I mean, I guess.
Okay, so there's a titanium Diver 1 coming. Cool.
Yeah. The first 2 are being assembled right over there in that room tomorrow morning.
And as we finished up our cups of coffee and he checked in with his watchmakers to grab his keys, my geeky maker self really got excited because we took a drive just a couple blocks away from the Aries HQ where I got to step in and actually take a look behind the scenes and what it takes for a manufacturer to create and turn not just American-made watch cases, but Pacific Northwest-made watch cases, including a titanium version apparently. The space is filled with equipment. There's 3 or so large CNC machines, and there's a center table. And in it, there's a couple of egg cartons full of cases and parts. An awesome shop dog. I love this pooch. Hello, Dog. And an even more awesome playlist. A playlist that even my own pops would enjoy, because it played nothing but oldies. Matt went over to his only machinist, who runs all this machinery.
Figure out a way to do that.
So one of the things that Doug brought up was skeletonizing a case.
What?
Yeah. So he was like, hey, while we're doing this, I got this idea of why don't we skeletonize part of the case? And I was like, yeah, why don't we?
Go in here and cut a pocket in here and then come over.
After they wrapped up, Matt introduced me to the secret sauce behind all the machining that makes up an Aries Diver 1.
Yeah. To me, this whole thing is nuts.
This is nuts.
It's crazy. This is nuts.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
So Lena and I talk all the time where we will be like, hey, we're doing this.
If the name Elena sounds familiar, that's because it's the same Elena that is an Analog Explorer alum, as well as the watchmaker of Aries.
So we're in the shop, and in this shop, we're able to do everything we do. So with this bank of CNCs that you see in front of you, this machine directly in front of us, you can tell by the fixturing on the bottom that it makes cases. Mm-hmm. So our cases start with a fine blank, a stamped fine blank. In order to maintain the case geometry of the design, we can't machine our case to the tolerance that we need to maintain that design from Rob Billet. So we get what is called a fine blank and a stamped fine blank. So
That is where I'm going to leave you. So thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you like to get our podcast. Remember, if you are in the Bellingham area, you might be listening to us on KMRE 102.3 FM. And this is where Chris would be like, it's community powered and community fueled at kmre.org. At least that's my best baritone I can pull off. Chris and I want to thank you again so much, each and every one of you who listens to the show and supports me and Chris. And we hope that you are staying safe and warm in this time. And Chris and I will rejoin the podcast and grab our mics and be talking with you soon as life stops occurring. Thank you so much. From the city by the Salish Sea, I'm AJ Barsay. We'll see you as soon as we can.